Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophets Speak. This is Saul Weinreb, the host of this podcast, and it is my honor to continue teaching the first book of Kings, Malachim Aleph, Perek Yud Gimel, that is chapter 13. We just completed, at the end of chapter 12, we finished reading about how Jeroboam, how he set up his own kingdom with the 10 tribes in the north, and in order to prevent the people from going to Jerusalem to pray, which Jeroboam thought in his own arrogance would result in the people going after the king of Judah and going after, meaning following after him, and then he would lose his kingship and eventually possibly lose his life. So and because of his fear that there might be some sort of reunification of the tribes together, he set up houses of worship, one in Beit El and one in Dan, where he's placed golden calves and set up houses of worship and said, you guys can come here rather than go to Jerusalem. And he celebrated a holiday which was a parallel to the Chag Sukkot of the Sukkot holiday, but he did it instead of the 15th month of Tishrei, which is the 7th month when Sukkot took place in Jerusalem. He made it on the 15th day of the month of Cheshvan, the 8th month. So he set up a new holiday, and told the people, you don't need to go to Jerusalem to worship, you can come worship here. Now, notably, it is understood by most commentaries, and it seems pretty clear that Yerovam did not tell the people that they were going to be worshiping a new god, right? Yerovam set it up as if this was a continuation of the religion, and which is why he said, when he made these golden calves, he said, Eila Elohecha, he said, this is Elohecha Yisrael, Hine, this is your God that took you out of Egypt. As if to say, we're continuing that same religion that began with the exodus of Egypt. We're still worshiping that same God, but this is a new place, and these calves somehow will represent that. A similar, mistake, a similar terrible, tragic mistake as to what had occurred in the Torah with the famous, unfortunately, infamous story of the golden calf. Now, it was at this celebration, because the verse says vihine, and behold, in other words, as if this is a continuation of what happened. So it seems like it was during this celebration of the holiday, Ish Elohim, a man of God, ba mi-Yehuda, came from Judah, bidvar Adonai, with a message of God, el Beit El, to Beit El. So while this whole thing was taking place in one of Yeravam's temples in Beit El, the Yeravam omed al hamizbeach lihaktir, and Yeravam was standing above or over the altar, doing his burning his offering, about to, or in the process of making the offering upon the altar. So, and this man comes. This man is an Ish Elokim, a prophet. Tradition has it, rabbinic tradition identifies this as Ido Hanavi, but regardless who it was, the verses here deliberately leave him anonymous. Why is he not given a name? It's not clear, but sometimes when as we read through the story, we'll find he made some mistakes, and he wasn't perfect in how he acted and delivered God's message. We're going to find that out later, but maybe that's why I didn't want to identify him. But even that, I guess, doesn't make that much sense, because the verses often identify people that made mistakes, so it's hard to know why it is. But it is interesting, and it is important to keep in mind that he is nameless. So this nameless prophet comes to deliver the word of God, and Yerovam is standing there leading the people in this celebration and leading them and bringing the sacrifice on the altar. And it's important to note also that Yerovam here has taken upon himself a role that the king really does not have. The Torah provides for a separation of powers, if you will, where the king is the political leader and the religious, the functionaries are the Kohanim, are the priests. But here, Yeravam has given himself the role, apparently, of the high priest as well. Another further sign of his arrogance, trying to maintain all the power in his own hands, which is pretty typical of someone who is like this. Vayikra, remember, Yeravam used populism. He said everyone can be a priest, and he brought priests from the regular people. He used his populist appeal, which he had been using the entire time in the beginning, in the right way, in the beginning, to try to ease the burden upon the people. But eventually, as many populists do, eventually they end up using that sentiment and using it to further their own selfish need for power. Vayikra al hamizbeach b'dvar Adonai, and he, this man of God, this prophet, called out over the mizbeach, over the altar, in the word of God. In other words, he's directing his words towards the altar, not to the king. Right away, that is a sign of a lack of deference to the king, the opposite of deference. He's deliberately ignoring the king to put him down, because knowing that the arrogance of the king. So Vayomer Mizbeach, Mizbeach, and he addresses the Mizbeach. He says, Altar, altar, Ko Amar Adonai, so says God. He nevein, behold, there is a son, a Nolad, who is born, meaning who will be born one day, Leveit David, in the house of David, Yoshiyahu Shemo, and his name is Yoshiyahu, or in English, Josiah. We're familiar with the king that's coming in many generations from this time, the king Yoshiyahu, the king Josiah, who indeed will destroy these houses of worship, and he will sacrifice upon you et kohanei habamot, the priests, and in this case he's directly saying this to Yeravam, as he is a priest, and the priests that are on these altars, hamikatrim alacha, that hamaktirim alacha, that bring that burn their sacrifices upon you, v'atzmot adam yisrafu alacha, and instead of the animal being sacrificed, it will be human bones burnt upon this altar. Now, of course, this is a prophecy where he's speaking of someone who is going to come and giving us his name. But I would like to draw attention to something here that's important. Yoshiyahu, the name Yoshiyahu, has a meaning to it. There's one other place in the Tanakh where the root of the word Yoshiyahu, right, which is Aleph Shin, is found, and that is in Yirmiyahu, in Jeremiah, chapter 50, where the word is called Ashvate, all right, Aleph Shin, which refers to the foundation, the support, but not just any foundation or support, but specifically the foundation of a building, right? I'm sorry, I was just trying to find the verse. It reads as follows. Natnayada naflu ashyoteha, or ashvateha, right? So that the where it's referring to the foundations or the buttress of a building. So it's not coincidental that this man of God chose to say that of the house of David, right, which is foundation is built on God, right? That's a foundation that's going to stand. This altar is going to fall apart and break apart. This altar is not built on the foundation of God. However, the future kings of Beit David, even though they might be wayward right now, Rehoboam, who's the current king, is not exactly doing the right thing or leading the right way, but the foundation is still God. So therefore, as we continue in verse 3, V'nosan bayom ahu mofetz lemar, and he gave a sign, right? Zeha mofetz I'm giving you a sign that what I'm saying is correct. Asher diber Adonai. That this is a sign that God said. Hinei hamizbeach nikra v'nishpach hadeshen asher alav. This mizbeach is going to just fall apart, and the ashes that are upon it will spill onto the ground. So he in other words, he says, however, the king Yoshiyahu is founded upon God, and therefore that kingdom will last. Vayikishmoa hamelach, when the king heard at Dvar Ish Elohim, the words of this man of God, of this prophet, Asher Koroel HaMizbeach Beveit El, that he called out to the Mizbeach. So the king is infuriated. He's being completely ignored. Here he is leading this grand ceremony, the grand dedication of his new temple, and on this holiday, and everyone is there, and he's acting as the high priest, and this guy comes, ignores him, talks to his altar, and says that his altar is going to fall apart, and gives him a little jab when he says it's going to be someone from your enemy. It will be a descendant of Rechavam named Yoshiyahu, who is built on a more solid foundation, that he's going to be the one that ends up doing this to this place. So Vayishlach Yeravam et Yado me'al hamizbeach leimar tifsuhu. So Yeravam lifted his hand, right, from the service that he was doing over the altar. So he's like, his hands are above the altar, and he picks up his hand there, and he points and screams, "Grab him!" Right? Vativash yado asher shalach alav, and his hand dried up. It became unable to. It's understood that it became unable to move. All the movement and motion and ability and strength of the hand was gone. V'lo yachol hashiv v'elav. He wasn't able to bring his hand back. So the v'hamizbeach, and at the same time the mizbeach, the altar itself, nikra, broke apart. Vayishafech hadeshen min hamizbeach, and the ashes spilled from the mizbeach. Just like the sign that the prophet of God had said was going to happen by the decree of God. So this tremendous drama has brought tremendous amount of insult and embarrassment to the king at the very inauguration ceremony of his new temple. He's right now standing there with his hands stuck in the air, and his new altar has just fallen apart beneath him. Vayan hamelach. So now the king had no choice, and he said, Vayomer Eloish Elohim. He said to the man of God, to the prophet, Chalna et pnei Adonai Elohecha. Go, please beseech or entreat the Lord your God, v'hitzpalel badi, and pray for me, v'tashov yadi elai, so that I could bring my hand back to me. Vayachal ish olim et pnei Adonai. So the prophet did pray to God, v'toshav yad hamelech elav, and the hand of the king came back to him, v'tihi k'varishona, and it was now worked as it was before. In other words, his hand was next to his body. I kind of like to imagine this in such a way that the king himself is conflicted. The king, remember, Yeravam, we have to remember who he is. He's a person who started as one who was righteous, one who genuinely stood up for the people when they needed help, genuinely was a fighter for the rights of the common folk, and who was genuinely promised the kingdom by God, right? So we're talking about a person who had who had something going for him. He had true compassion for others. He was a good person. However, at least he once was. However, his arrogance has completely overtaken him, has completely taken control of him and his behavior, to the extent that he was ready to lead all of the people of Israel astray from God, and to involve himself in such all because he was afraid of his own honor. Imagine now this man of God comes to him and says, and ignores him and says, "You're a nothing. You're a nobody. You're such a nobody that I'm not even going to talk to you. And this altar that you're working on right now is flimsy. It's not established on a solid foundation. It's going to fall apart." When the king raises his hand, it's almost like a psychosomatic symptom where his hand freezes, and somewhere in the back of his mind, Yerovam is thinking, Yerovam is thinking to himself, like, what have I come to? What have I sunk to? Right? So he has this conflict, this terrible conflict. On the one hand, he wants to extend his hand out and say, grab the guy and kill him, and continue on that path of arrogance. On the other hand, he can't bring that hand back to himself, because he's thinking to what have I sunk? He's right. The foundation of everything here is nothing. It's not, if I don't have God behind me, I have nothing behind me. So when the prophet goes and prays for him to God, he asks the prophet, pray to God for me. Yeravam is starting to turn. We find these words over and over again. We find the language lashuv, to return, in this chapter. We find it, I think, I don't know, somewhere around 20 times. I might be off by the exact number. But this return, as we see as the chapter goes on, return is a reference to the idea that Yerovam still has a chance to return to God. He can still go back. He can still turn around. He can still rectify his mistakes. And at this moment, many of the commentators ask, why would the prophet pray for him? Well, the prophet prayed for him because he saw that there was a potential, there was a spark. So now, all of a sudden, he gets his movement back. All of a sudden, he's able to bring his arm back to himself. So then the king says to Ish Elohim, that by Daber HaMelech Elisha Elohim, the king now speaks to this man of God. He says, Boa iti habaita, come with me to my house, usa'ada, and let's eat. V'etno locha matas, and I will give you a gift. So here this is tricky. Now the king is back to his old king self, and he's saying, it seems like he wants to bring him close to him, but the king doesn't say, I made a mistake. He doesn't immediately. As soon as he starts coming back to himself, and his arrogance is completely taken over, it sounds like he's trying to draw this prophet into his circle of prophets, into his circle of religious leaders, in order to convince him that this is the place to be, this is where the future is at. Bayomer Isha Elohim el HaMelech. So the prophet doesn't fall for this. He says to the king, you can't buy me with money. Even if you'd give me half of the value of your entire household, lo avo imach, I won't come with you. V'lo ochal lechem, I will not eat bread. V'lo eshte mayim, I will not drink water b'makom hazeh, in this place. Because it sounds like if I did partake of that, I would become corrupt as well. I would be taking gifts from you. All right, I would be taking gifts from you. I would become completely corrupt. I would have derived benefit from you and your evil ways. Because when I received this message from God, God commanded me, saying as follows: do not eat any bread. Do not drink water. Don't become friends with them. And don't return on the same path that you came. In other words, leave, because if Tashuv Baderach Asher Halachta is almost like a hint saying, we don't want you to revert, right? We don't want, God is instructing this prophet, don't return on this path on which you go. And I saw in a book in the Magid Studies in Tanakh by Alex Israel, by Rabbi Israel, and I'm quoting from him, who brings some scholars who demonstrate that this idea of lo soshuv baderach, we find it also, that the kings are not supposed to, we mentioned this earlier, that the kings of Israel are not supposed to have too many horses, because they might go back on the path that they went to back to Egypt. There's this idea that when one returns on that path, the one is somehow negating the mission upon which he is sent. So if he would have retraced his steps, it would be like a symbolic retraction of his mission. So God is saying, don't eat bread, don't drink water, because if you do that, you will be joining them, you'll be in cahoots with them, you will have benefited from them, and don't return on the path that you went. And he therefore, when he left the place, he left on a different path. And he did not return on that path, asher ba va Beit El, that with which he had come when he came into the town of Beit El before. Again, we have this term velo shav and velo tashuv baderach, velo shav baderach, giving us the idea, constantly hinting to us that there is a path here to turn around. There is a way to change. But unfortunately, Jereboam is not choosing that path. I'm going to stop here. In the next podcast, we're going to continue with a interesting episode that happens with this man, this prophet, as he is leaving the town of Beit El. But we're going to conclude right here with this part of the story, this part of the interesting story. Thank you so much for studying chapter 13, part A with me of this book of Kings. Looking forward to studying the rest of this beautiful book together, and have a wonderful day.